Now let's add some real-world faces to this play to make it hit home even harder. The lead actor, that's Donald Trump and the United States, commanding the global stage with their economic power, military might, and America First attitude that shakes up alliances like a plot twist no one saw coming. The understudy itching for the top spot is Xi Jinping of China, steering the world's second-largest economy with careful steps and big visions, dreaming of rewriting the rules of the show to make Beijing the new director. The swing performer, always shifting alliances and playing the crowd like a pro, is India, under Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who weighs options between teaming up with the US for tech and defense or cozying up to China for trade deals, all while keeping his options open to protect his nation's fast growth. And the veteran fighting for relevance is Vladimir Putin of Russia, cut off from many old partners after bold moves like invading Ukraine, but desperately hunting for new ones to stay in the game and avoid a lonely exit from the stage. This is, of course, a basic analogy. It skips over tons of complicated backstories like deep historical rivalries, border fights, or secret trade deals. But it starts to feel real and exciting when you see how these characters' plots all crashed together just last week. Not on a pretend theater set with fake lights and props, but right there on the actual world stage at a major international gathering in China, where President Xi took center stage as the host, backed by a full cast of leaders from across the globe, turning the event into a blockbuster show of unity. The event was the 2025 Shanghai Cooperation Organization (SCO) Summit, held in the bustling port city of Tianjin, China, from August 31 to September 1st. This group, often called the SCO, started in 2001 as a small club for fighting terrorism and boosting security among Asian neighbors. But it's grown into a big club for countries in Asia, Europe, and the Middle East that want to team up on trade, energy, and pushing back against US influence. Over 20 world leaders showed up, representing huge chunks of the global economy, from oil-rich Central Asia like Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan to fast-growing spots in South Asia and the Middle East, plus observers from places like Iran and Saudi Arabia. Together, these nations control nearly 40% of the world's people, a massive share of oil and gas, and key trade routes that could challenge Western control. It was a big deal, because the summit ended with a joint declaration slamming unilateral coercive measures like US sanctions and tariffs, vowing closer military ties, cooperation on AI safety and drug fights, and even keeping space free of weapons. They also announced a new SCO development bank to fund projects without needing Western money like the US or Europe. But zoom in on the fun, personal moments that made headlines and went viral on social media. There was India's Prime Minister Modi and Russia's President Putin sharing a quick, friendly handhold, easy to miss in the crowd of suits and flags. But it showed their growing bond despite US pressure. They then walked right over to China's President Xi, shaking hands warmly and forming a close huddle where they smiled, laughed, and chatted like old pals, with videos capturing them joking around during breaks and even sharing light-hearted stories. Later, Modi hopped into Putin's limousine for private photos and talks, while Putin called Modi his dear friend in speeches, praising their long history of trust. Modi posted on X about how delightful it was to meet Putin again, stressing that India and Russia stand strong together, even in tough times like the Ukraine war. Overseeing it all was Xi, who kicked off the summit with a speech full of subtle digs at the United States, things like calling out bullying practices, Cold War mentality, and unfair trade wars, which many saw as indirect jabs at Trump's aggressive tariffs and the West's sanctions on Russia. Putin jumped in too, blaming the West for starting the Ukraine war and praising the SCO as a better way forward for a multipolar world without one country bossing everyone around. This wasn't just chit-chat at a fancy dinner. It highlighted a growing clash between these countries' alliance and the US-led system of free trade, democracy and alliances like NATO that America has pushed for decades. Trump's reaction? He posted on social media a photo of the three leaders together, saying it looks like we've lost India and Russia to deepest, darkest China, showing his frustration with the optics. To really get what's going on, think of each country as feeling a strong push away from the US and a pull toward each other, like magnets in a tricky game where one side's tough moves force the others to team up. Let's break it down step by step, starting with India, the one caught right in the middle, between these two massive powers, trying to balance like a tightrope walker. India, the jilted partner. For a long time, India has been building a close friendship with the United States, seeing it as a key to its big dreams of becoming an industrial giant and a global tech leader. Remember back in 2019, during Trump's first time as president, there was this massive welcome event in Houston, Texas called Howdy Modi. It packed a whole stadium with over 50,000 cheering fans, one of the largest receptions ever for a foreign leader in modern US history, with Trump calling it unprecedented as the crowd went wild with applause and chants. The next year, Trump flew to India for the Namaste Trump rally in Ahmedabad, which drew even bigger crowds, over 1 million people in some estimates, waving flags, dancing and chanting in the hot sun. Both leaders knew their countries needed each other more and more for jobs, tech and security. Look at the numbers. India's exports to the US have shot up steadily over the last 30 years, especially in recent times, turning America into India's top buyer for things like software services, medicines, diamonds, and electronics, worth over $80 billion last year alone. In return, the US sees India as a vital buddy against China. They're part of the Quad group with Japan and Australia, which is basically a team for joint military drills, tech sharing, and keeping Chinese power in check in the huge Indo-Pacific region, from the Indian Ocean to the Pacific. Both India and the US worry about China's rise. India shines as a global hub for services like IT support and call centers employing millions, but in manufacturing, making factories churn out goods like phones and cars. It's still playing catch-up to China as massive scale with its cheap labor and huge supply chains. That's changing, though. India is pouring billions into new tech, like artificial intelligence, AI, for smarter businesses, healthcare, and even defense tools to predict threats. And don't forget the other AI, the America-India partnership, which has grown with joint military exercises in the ocean, sharing spy tech and billions in investments from US companies like Google and Apple building factories in India. But all that good momentum hit a wall with a huge public slap from the US that felt like a betrayal. Just last week, on August 27, 2025, President Trump slapped a whopping 50% tariff. That's an extra tax on imports on most Indian goods coming into America, like steel, textiles, and farm products. This is one of the harshest tariffs the US has ever hit any country with, and it's hurting India's booming economy bad, with experts predicting thousands of job losses in export hubs. Why? The tariff splits into two equal 25% parts. One is a reciprocal charge because of trade gaps where India sells more to the US than it buys back, about $30 billion surplus, which Trump says is unfair and kills American jobs. But the other half? Straight up punishment for India buying cheap Russian oil to fuel its cars, factories and power plants. India now gets about 40% of its oil from Russia at discounts, saving billions amid high global prices. Critics in the US say this helps Russia's war efforts in Ukraine by giving Putin cash to buy weapons, calling India a laundromat for Kremlin money that washes dirty oil sales. Indian businesses in labor-heavy fields like textiles, shoes, clothing and gems are getting crushed. Factories are slowing down, orders from US buyers are dropping, and workers in places like Mumbai and Surat are worried about paychecks. One exporter, Shamim Azad from the textile industry, told reporters it's already a disaster, with small firms closing and big ones laying off staff. He said sectors like apparel could lose $10 billion in sales this year. Trump even posted on Truth Social that he doesn't mind if India teams up with Russia. He said their dead economies can sink together for all he cares, mocking India's growth. Failed talks between US and Indian trade teams didn't help, as Trump doubled down despite pleas from Modi. Instead of hurting Russia directly, this move seems to be backfiring big time, driving India closer to Moscow and even warming ties with Beijing. That's why you saw Modi and Putin so buddy-buddy at the Tianjin summit, holding hands riding together in the limo and agreeing to boost energy deals. It's a sign of India looking for support, where the US is pushing it away while also restarting flights and pilgrimages with China to ease border tensions. Vladimir Putin's full-scale invasion of Ukraine back in February 2022 has turned Russia's global spot into a real mess, adding layers of trouble to everything it does abroad, like a villain who's cornered but still swinging. Once seen as a superpower from Soviet days and the Cold War with nukes and vast lands, Russia now struggles to keep that image alive amid battlefield stalemates and money woes. The war has dragged on for over 3.5 years, costing hundreds of thousands of lives, trillions in damages, and most of Russia's old friends in the West. Trump has acted warm toward Putin sometimes, like getting a friendly birthday call from him last year and praising his strength. But their chats often fizzle out, especially when Trump pushes for a Ukraine ceasefire that Putin ignores or twists. Trump has complained publicly in interviews, saying he talks to Putin a lot about ending it quickly, but then Russian missiles hit Kyiv or other cities. And after a few times, you realize the words mean nothing. Peace talks in places like Istanbul have stalled repeatedly. Across 2 US presidencies now, from Biden's term and back to Trump, Russia has gotten slammed with the world's toughest sanctions, no-fly zones for its rich elites and oligarchs. Trillions in bank assets frozen in places like London and New York. Total bans on selling oil to Europe and the US, which used to buy half of Russia's exports, and even ships seized at sea to enforce the rules. Just last month, for example, German officials grabbed a Russian tanker called the Aventine, flagged under Panama to hide its origin, carrying 100,000 tons of oil from Russia to Egypt, part of a crackdown that has idled dozens of vessels. These hits wound deep. Russia's economy is hurting, with inflation up, the ruble shaky, and war spending eating 6% of GDP, even if it hides the pain by printing money and rationing goods. No one would fight so hard to lift sanctions through backdoor deals and UN lobbying if they didn't sting this bad. With Europe basically cut off, Putin calls it energy suicide because he blew up his own big markets there by invading and facing boycotts. Russia has to sell its oil somewhere fast to keep the lights on. As the world's #2 crude oil exporter, after Saudi Arabia pumping about 10 million barrels a day, Russia depends on this cash for 40% of its budget. In July 2025 alone, the top buyers were China and India by a mile, snapping up billions in discounted barrels. China took 2.2 million a day, India 1.8 million, often resold to Europe at a markup. India keeps Russia's wallet full during the war, buying cheap and saving its own people money on fuel, while China sends over high-tech parts for weapons, drones and factories, despite Western bans. Putin needs these partners badly to survive the squeeze and fund the front lines. At the SCO summit, his big goal was to prove he's not a lonely outcast on the world stage. He wants the world to see Russia as a major player with real allies, even if the Ukraine mess shows it's weaker than it pretends, failing quick wins after 3 years against a smaller neighbor. By posing with Modi and Xi, shaking hands, laughing in photos, and signing the joint declaration against US bullying, Putin projects strength to cover the cracks, like a veteran actor stealing a scene with charm. Through all this chaos, China spots a golden chance to rise higher and reshape the stage. And Xi isn't holding back. He's grabbing it with both hands, directing the show like a mastermind. Right after the SCO wrapped up in Tianjin on September 1st, China threw a huge military parade in Beijing's Tiananmen Square on September 3rd, showing off shiny new tanks, fighter jets, missile launchers, and marching troops to flex its muscles on the 80th anniversary of Japan's defeat in World War II. It was a massive event, with over 10,000 soldiers and 500 pieces of equipment, watched by thousands in the streets and millions on TV. A photo from that day captured Xi standing tall next to Putin and North Korea as leader Kim Jong-un, like a power trio poster, all smiles and salutes to show their ironclad friendship against common foes. Xi sees the global setup, carefully built by the US over almost 100 years, with things like the United Nations, World Bank, NATO, and free trade rules, as cracking under Trump's watch, with allies pulling away and trade wars everywhere. Trump's reciprocal tariffs on everyone, they do it to us, we do it to them, are seen as selfish bullying that weakens America's old alliances and opens doors for rivals. She believes China can step in as the new leader, offering a fairer, multipolar world without one boss calling all shots, where countries trade freely but follow Beijing's lead on tech and security. The SCO is Xi's main tool for this. It's grown from a small security group in 2001 to a global network of 10 full members plus observers, where China pushes its ideas on trade tech standards and defense pacts. As the US gets tangled in one-on-one trade fights like the new India tariffs and pulls back from big group talks like the WTO, China rushes to fill the gap with cash and connections.